Alright, we're going to start off with the external anatomy of the pig. First, right here, what you would call the ear. The outer bit of the ear is called the pinna, and it directs sound into the middle ear. The external nares of the pig are right here, and they're the holes, and they allow for a sense of smell along with being able to breathe through their nose. The anus is at the back of the pig, and it is the opening closest to the tail, so it's right there. And then this is a female pig, so its vaginal orifice is right here, and it is the female reproductive organ, and it opens to the birth canal. The anus of the pig is the exit for waste from the large intestine. The umbilical cord is right here, and it provides blood to the fetus when it's in the parent. And when you get close, you can see that the umbilical cord has two umbilical arteries and then the umbilical vein, which provides blood flow from the mother to the young. The umbilical artery is there too, and that's blood flow goes through the artery and comes back through the vein. The nictitating membrane is in the eye of the pig, and in previous animals such as the salamanders, the frogs, it was a whole membrane. But on the pig, it is just a small mass of tissue right at the corner of the eye. It's right there. You can see it. It's very small and not very noticeable on these animals, and it's used to help protect the eye, and it keeps it clear. The nipples are on both male and female pigs, and on a female pig is when they're useful. They are an external opening from the mammary glands to allow the young pigs to feed on the mother pig. And then that's it for a female pig. Alright, this is the external anatomy for a male pig. The male is very similar, but has some key differences. One is the male pig has a penis underneath its epidermis, which can come out, and it is the male's copulatory organ. And fertilization for the pigs are internal. We have the scrotum, which stores the testes, and in a pig that's not at term, the testes will be still up in the pig, but they'll drop down when the pig's mature. The urethral opening is right here. It's pretty non-obvious, but that's the urethral opening right there. All right, now we're going to go through the oral cavity of the fetal pig. So we can start with the tongue, which is right here. It's the big thing right here, and it manipulates its food with the tongue. It can also lick things, and the tongue has taste buds on it, which are used to taste the foods. So it helps identify what they're eating, if they've eaten it before, that sort of thing. There's the hard palate, which is right here, and then your soft palate is right behind it. So this is the soft palate. And here, let me get a probe. So this is your hard palate, and it's hardened, and it's got these ridges, and then the soft palate's right here, just back here, behind the hard palate. We have the glottis, which is right here, and it's an opening to the respiratory tract. It goes into here. This is the glottis. And part of the glottis, or another part of the respiratory tract, is the epiglottis, which is, this one's not very obvious. Usually they stick out and are more prominent, but on this, it's just this. This is the epiglottis right here. Yeah, epiglottis is right here. The incisors are a certain type of teeth. They're right here. This is one of them. There's another one right here. And they are responsible. They're more of like teeth for snipping and slicing or biting, that kind of thing. You have the esophageal opening, which is right down here. This is the esophageal opening, and it goes into the digestive tract of the animal. right here. And I think that's everything in the animal. You also have cheek teeth, which are not very obvious, but they're that's not really part of this. And yeah, that's everything for the oral cavity of the pig. All right, so we've moved on to the digestive tract of the animal. So let us start. We're going to start with the duodenum, which is the first third of the small intestine. So this is the stomach right here, and it goes into the small intestine, and the first third of that is going to be the duodenum. The second third of that, or the middle of the small intestine, is the jejunum, and the last part of the small intestine, when it enters the last third, and the closest to the large intestine, is going to be the ileum. So then the next part is the rugae, which we'll start with the stomach itself. So this is the stomach of the animal, and its responsibility is that it secretes digestive enzymes and digests foods, / breaks them down, which is the same thing. And so on the animal, inside, you'll find, on the inside of the stomach, is going to be rugae, which this animal doesn't have many. It's not very obvious, but they're going to be longitudinal ridges in the stomach, and they increase the surface area of the stomach. So the large intestine is next, which is going to be right here. And while the small intestine was used to absorb nutrients, and it's a very long quantity, it takes a while to absorb nutrients, the large intestine is slightly shorter, and it's a thicker material, a thicker tube, and it mostly absorbs water and some nutrients still. So that's the large intestine. The spleen is right here. The spleen is a tongue. It looks kind of like a tongue in this animal, and it destroys red blood cells, older red blood cells. So it destroys red blood cells. The esophagus is a little bit trickier to see, but what I'm going to do is I can take my probe and put it into the esophagus of the animal, of the pig, and it looks kind of odd. And we can wiggle it around, and you can see underneath the voice box. Here, let me get it first. There. So right there, you can right here. You see how it's wiggling right next to my left hand? That's the esophagus of the pig, and that's where it's a long tube that goes to the stomach, and it connects the mouth to the stomach for food. After the esophagus, we have the rectum, which is after the large intestine. It's going to be right here. Scooch up the pig. It's going to be right here. That's the rectum, and it is the end of the large intestine, and it's where waste will be stored here until it leaves through the anus. The next is the liver, which, as most animals, is going to be really large. This is the liver, all of this. That's the liver, and it is, it processes the toxins in blood and also creates bile. And the bile that it creates is stored by the gallbladder, which is going to be hidden under here. This is the gallbladder. Let me grab my probe. This is the gallbladder, and it stores the bile created by the animal. You can see it's a little bit of a looser sac compared to the liver, which is a bit harder. The next is the cecum is it's a blind-ended tube attached to the large intestine. So it's going to be this tube right here. You can see it has no end. It's that's the cecum, and it helps in slow digestion of plant materials. The pancreas is a granular looking material or organ, and it is found, that's the pancreas right there. The mesentery connects all of the small intestine together. So when I splay it, you can see all these red little veins, red capillaries and such. That's the mesentery, and it holds the small intestine together. So you can see it's all it's not loose, it's pretty compact in there and all in one. And it provides blood flow and allows to the small intestine, so that way the nutrients can go into the bloodstream. The umbilical vein, it has been kind of cut off, but so it's right here under the umbilical cord. This is the umbilical vein, right here. That's the umbilical vein, and it's responsible to allow blood flow into the mother. There's also the umbilical arteries, which are going to be to the side of the urinary bladder, which is this. This is the urinary bladder. These are the arteries on the sides. One last thing that I forgot to mention in the digestive tract is I labeled it, but I didn't actually say what it was. If we just scooch everything back over. So the pancreas, this granular structure down here, functions in producing digestive enzymes. So there we go. That's everything. All right, we have moved on to the circulatory system of the fetal pigs. So we'll start off with the thymus gland, which will be found right here. This is the thymus gland of the animal. And its job is it makes the T cells, so it's actually a part of the immune system. So the next I'm going to show as well on this animal, the pericardium, which is a thin covering that covers the heart. So yeah, this right here is the pericardium. Now I'm going to move this animal out of the way for another one, which has a more exposed, has their veins more exposed. And then I'm going to zoom in. All right. So now, the next is the carotid artery, which its purpose is to bring blood to the head. So that's going to be found right here. So this one right here is the carotid artery. The pulmonary artery, also known as the trunk, is easiest to find on the heart, and it's going to be right here. And pulmonary has to relate to the respiratory system. So this is actually bringing blood. It's going to carry deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle to the lungs. The next is the aorta, which its point is to supply the body, the lower body, with oxygenated blood. So you can find it on the heart, but you can also find it by gently teasing everything to the side. And let's see if I can get this on camera. I gotta figure it out. Here we go. Tease it this way. Okay, one moment. I gotta find a good way to show this. Oh, wait, here we go. There. So, that right there in front, or to the right of my 3 fingers, that channel down there. Here, let me see if I can point at it. Right there, that is the aorta. All right. And like I mentioned, that supplies the body with oxygenated blood. So, moving forward, we have the right atrium, which is right here. This is the right atrium. And it takes deoxygenated blood and pushes it into the left ventricle. Or, wait, sorry, the right ventricle. My apologies. The left atrium, on the other hand, takes oxygenated blood and pumps it into the left ventricle. So this goes here, this goes here. The renal artery, also known as the artery for the kidney, is going to be found down here. Right here, let me scooch her up a little bit. There we go. Is going to be found down here. So this is our kidney, which I have kind of dislocated from everything. And right here, this little red bit, that is the renal artery. And the point of the renal artery is it brings the blood to the kidney. So there's going to be one on each kidney. The pulmonary vein, which is next, is going to be on the lungs, just like the pulmonary artery. It doesn't have a fancy name though, and it's going to be let me scooch up animal. It's going to be hidden, but right there, you can see the little bit of blue. That's the pulmonary vein, and it takes, it connects the lungs to the, it carries blood from the lungs back to the left atrium. So then we have the septum, which is actually inside the heart, but what I can show is this is the right ventricle and the left ventricle, and this dividing line right here is where the septum would be, because these animals have a 4-chambered heart. So the right and lefts are completely separate, and that separation is the septum. The right ventricle is right here, and the purpose of the right ventricle is to pump deoxygenated blood through the pulmonary artery and to the lungs. And this right here is the left ventricle, and its purpose is to pump oxygenated blood out into the body. The jugular vein will be found right next to the carotid artery. So this is the jugular right here, this one, and it is bringing blood from the heart, from the head, sorry, back to the heart via the anterior vena cava. So speaking of vena cavas, we have two. We have the anterior and the posterior. So the anterior is going to be this big one right here. And that is carrying blood from the cranial portion of the body back to the heart. And then you have the posterior vena cava, which when I lift up the heart, you can see right here. So that's the posterior vena cava, and it carries blood from the caudal portion of the body. Lastly, we have the gastric artery, which is the stomach, which is going to be, let me scooch the animal up. Oop, oop. So this is the stomach right here, and this is the gastric arteries are going to be here, and they are providing blood to the blood flow to the stomach. And then the hepatic artery, or which means the liver, is going to be right here. You can see the a little bit of red, and that is bringing blood to the liver. And so that's going to do it for the circulatory system of this animal. All right, we have now moved on to the respiratory system of our fetal pigs. So the respiratory system is a lot more simple compared to the circulatory system. So we'll start off with probably the most obvious part, which is going to be the trachea, which is this right here, and it's going to go down. And the trachea's responsibility is it transfers air from the mouth to the bronchi, and then to the lungs. Next, we're going to have the diaphragm, which is going to be this thin muscle right here. This one's kind of been mangled a little bit, but this is the diaphragm right here. And the job of the diaphragm is it draws air into the chest cavity it actually moves up and down, so it makes the thoracic cavity larger, which has, due to pressure differential, has air going. So this is pretty much what allows the animal to breathe. And compared to turtles, which had to move limbs to be able to breathe and had a lot more complex method, pigs, and most mammals just have a diaphragm. It's a lot easier. The larynx is also known as the voice box, and that's going to be right here. And the voice box contains the vocal cords, so it allows for communication. So that's how the pigs can like squeal and make oinks and that kind of thing. Next we have the lungs, which is probably the first thing that comes to mind when you think about the respiratory system. And so this is where gas exchange actually occurs. So we have multiple lobes. We have lobes here, here. There's even some smaller ones that go down into here. So lots of little lobes of the lung. And then finally, we have the bronchi, which is which as we go down the trachea right here, it's going to branch off into some bronchi. And because this has multiple lobes, there's actually a large quantity of a couple more bronchi down here. So trachea, and then these bronchi. There's going to be one here, and there's some elsewhere. And they are connecting it's the branch from the trachea, it branches into the lungs. And that's going to be everything for the respiratory system, so a lot simpler compared to the nervous. All right, we are on our final activity of the fetal pig lab, which is the urogenital system. So this is going to have to include both the urinary system and also the reproductive systems. So we will start with the kidney. This right here is the kidney. There's one on this side. And there's going to be one right here, which I've kind of moved around a little bit. So, and the kidney's job is it filters the blood for wastes and turns it into urine. So next we have the urethra, which is pretty difficult to find. So the urethra is going to be in this area. It's after the urinary bladder. There's two tubes. One is the vagina, and one is the urethra. And it leads from the bladder to the outside. The ureter is next, which is going to be the tube that connects the kidney. So here's the ureter. This is a very nicely exposed one. So here, this is the ureter, and it's going in, the ureter goes from the kidney to the urinary bladder. Next, we're going to look a little closer at a kidney. So here's one that has been exposed. So we have the medulla of the kidney, which kind of sounds like middle, and it's more like right here. So this is the medulla. And then we have the cortex of the kidney, which is the outside right here. This is the cortex. So those are those parts of the kidney. Once you have the urinary bladder, which is going to be this right here. And the job of the urinary bladder is that it stores urine until it is expelled by the body through the urethra. Next, we're going to have the ovary. So in order to see that, I have to move this aside, move this up, and here we have, so here's right at the end here is the ovary. And the purpose of the ovary is to store eggs and then release them over time. There's two ovaries, one on each side, a left and a right. And what connects them right here is these are the fallopian tubes, or also known as the oviducts, and it acts as a passageway for sperm to reach the egg and start to fertilize the eggs. So this is the oviduct, and the egg will travel through the oviduct until it reaches around here. This part, the ends, let me just move it around. These right here, that is going to be the uterus, sorry, and it acts as a part of the birth canal. It's where the pigs develop. Next, we have the cervix, which is right here. These two tubes go, and this is the cervix right here. And the cervix is the junction between the vagina and the uteri. It dilates during heat, but is usually constricted during the remaining of the estrus cycle. Lastly, we have the vagina, which, as mentioned before, is going to be one of the two tubes that go through here and lead to the outside. And yeah, that's going to be everything. We'll go with the final part, which is going to be the male's reproductive system. All right, we have moved on to the last part of this dissection, which is going to be the urogenital system, but specifically for males. So, just two things. We have the testes and the epididymis. Testes. There's going to be two of them. We've got one here, and we got one here. So those are the two. The purpose of the testes is that they produce sperm. So next, we're going to have the epididymis, which, this is a testy, right there. And this is the epididymis, and it's gonna go into the body. So the purpose of the epididymis is it transfers sperm from the testes to the vas deferens, but it also allows for the sperm to mature. So that is all for the male. That is all for that, and yeah, that's the end of the dissection.